Kale Draven scowled at the flickering diagnostic panel of his ship, the Iron Wren. The engine's core had finally flatlined after weeks of warning beeps and sputtering misfires. He slapped the panel once, more out of frustration than hope, then slumped into the co-pilot's chair. Outside the cracked viewport, the ochre skies of Varela Prime loomed, thick with swirling dust. A desert planet on the fringe of Coalition space. Not the best place for a breakdown. Dead. Real dead, Kale muttered. He pushed himself to his feet and exited the ship. The air was dry, but breathable, and he made his way across the landing yard of Dock Point Taller, a ramshackle port filled with rusting hulls and scavenger crews. At least the repair crews weren't lacking. But the quote he got from the dockmaster, a broad-shouldered avian with rust-colored feathers and a smirk full of credit fangs, was enough to make his jaw clench. "You want how much?" Kale growled. 3 days' work. The avian shrugged, scratching the side of his beak with an oil-smeared talon. "You got a better option?" Kale didn't. He had a delivery contract waiting at a mining hub in the far canyons of Varela's southern hemisphere, and if he missed it, he'd eat a penalty fee that'd make the repair costs look like pocket change. Which left one option. Public transit. The Doomweaver line. Kale shouldered his duffel bag and headed for the dusty rail station that straddled the southern edge of the outpost. The sky was already darkening as 2 small suns dipped toward the western ridges. He stood in line behind a few traders and pilgrims, purchased a silver transit chip from a cracked dispenser, and followed signs to the boarding platform. The mag rail train, sleek and shimmering with mirrored plating, floated silently above the rails, humming with stored power. Kale stepped into the rearmost car and scanned for a seat. Most of the benches were occupied, but one area near the back stood conspicuously empty, except for a single figure seated alone, like a gravity well pushing everyone else away. She sat with her back straight, arms folded across a small satchel in her lap. Her fur shimmered in the ambient glow of the train lights, bright orange with streaks of copper that glinted like embers. A long, bushy tail curled neatly beside her, and her pointed ears twitched now and then as if scanning the car for movement. Humanoid, yes, but definitely not human. Kale hesitated. Something about her presence demanded attention but warned of distance. Her golden eyes caught his, just briefly, and then flicked away. She looked like she expected him to pass by, like everyone else had. But he didn't. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, gesturing to the seat beside her. She blinked, surprised. "No. I mean, go ahead." Kale slid into the seat, setting his duffel at his feet. Her scent hit him immediately. Earthy, warm, spiced with something wild and floral. Not unpleasant. Not to him. Others may have avoided her because of it, but Kale had grown up in the jungles of Elverin Delta. He liked things that reminded him of wild places. "I'm Kale," he offered, leaning back as the train began its silent acceleration. The Vulpine girl glanced at him again, her eyes cautious but curious. "I'm Selah," she said. Her voice was low, smooth, like silk run over stone. "People usually give you more space," Kale noted, watching the other passengers keep their distance. "You bite?" Selah's ears twitched with what might have been amusement. "No. But they think I smell bad." "You don't." She looked at him then, properly. Her eyes were liquid gold, flecked with green. "You're the first person who's said that. Then people have no idea what they're missing." A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. She relaxed slightly, her shoulders easing under the sleeveless tunic she wore. Tan cloth cut to fit her lean, athletic frame. Her arms were marked by subtle stripes and darker fur, almost like tattoos. "What brings you to Varela?" he asked. "I'm a geoseeker. The Coalition hired me to scan for subaquifers. My people can sense mineral and water flows underground." She glanced out the window at the passing dunes. "There's something ancient beneath this place. Something forgotten." Kale raised a brow. "I'm starting to think sitting next to you was more than luck." Selah tilted her head, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Maybe it was." The Doomweaver glided smoothly across the landscape, passing endless ridges of rust-colored sand and towering rock spires shaped by wind and centuries. Inside the railcar, the glow dimmed to twilight mode, casting the space in a soft amber that played across Sayla's fur in hypnotic waves. Cale found himself stealing glances more than he should. Her presence was magnetic, not just her appearance, but the way she held herself. Alert. Quietly coiled like she was waiting for something. You mentioned your people, Cale said. Where are they from? From the Varnan wilds, she answered, her voice distant. We're wanderers by tradition, mostly avoided by the core worlds. Too primitive for politics. Too evolved to tame. He chuckled. Sounds familiar. Sayla gave him a sideways glance. You. Born on Elverin Delta. My folks were colonists, terraformers. I joined the service to escape the mud. But it followed me, in one form or another. She smiled faintly. Mud has a way of doing that. Before he could reply, a subtle jolt ran through the train. Then another. Lights flickered above them. Cale straightened, instincts flaring. That wasn't track movement. Sayla's ears flattened slightly. She sniffed the air and then stood up, her movements fluid and quiet. Something's wrong. The train lurched. Lights went out completely, replaced by a red emergency glow that painted the passengers in pulsing scarlet. Panic immediately set in. A few screams, scrambling bodies, someone shouting from the front car. Cale stood, placing himself between Sayla and the chaos. Stay close. He heard the sharp whine of external thrusters, then saw shadows streak past the side windows. Hoverbikes. Half a dozen, maybe more. Raiders, Sayla said, voice low but certain. They hunt these lines for hostages. Salvage. Guess we're the prize. The train screeched to a halt. Somewhere up front, something exploded, brief, hot, and violent. Dust fell from the ceiling panels. Then came a metallic grinding directly above them. They're on the roof, Cale muttered, eyes scanning the car. We need to move. Now. Sayla nodded. Follow me. She led him toward the back access door, her movements impossibly graceful despite the jerking floor. A few passengers were frozen in place. Others clutched bags or children. No one was prepared. Sayla knelt beside the emergency panel and slid a claw tip under the seal. The panel popped with a click. You know how to hotwire one of these? Cale asked, impressed. I've escaped worse than sand raiders, she murmured, her fingers flying over wires and nodes. Above them, something slammed into the car roof. The door hissed open. They had only seconds. Cale drew a compact plasma cutter from his duffel and handed it to her. In case you need more than claws. Sayla accepted it with a nod. Let's survive this. Then we'll talk weapons. The emergency door hissed open, revealing the narrow coupling between railcars. Outside, the harsh Varellan wind screamed through the gap. Cale ducked through first, then turned to offer Sayla his hand. She ignored it, springing across with feline agility, tail flicking behind her. The moment she landed, a plasma blade burst through the ceiling behind them, searing bright, followed by a thundering crash. They're cutting through the roof! Cale shouted. We need to get the rest of these people out of here. They moved fast, ducking into the next car, which was filled with crates and sealed cargo. Cale motioned to a panel near the end. Manual access here. We might be able to climb out onto the side platform and circle around to the front. But before he could pry the hatch open, 3 raiders dropped into the car behind them. They were tall, wrapped in synth leather dust gear, with breather masks and glowing red visors. One had a scatterpulse rifle, another wielded twin shock blades. The third simply cracked his knuckles, revealing cybernetic arms. Step away from the vulpine, human, the lead raider rasped. She's worth more alive than your whole ship. Cale didn't hesitate. He charged the closest one, tackling him into a crate with a crash. The shock blades flew from the raider's hands. Cale punched him hard enough to crack the mask, then rolled away as a blast scorched the floor beside him. Sayla was already moving. She dashed low under a crate, popped up behind the rifleman, and slashed the plasma cutter across the back of his knee. He dropped screaming, firing wildly. The last raider turned toward her. Kale grabbed a metal rod from a broken crate lid and slammed it into the man's side. He grunted, stumbled, and tried to counter, but Sayla finished him, flipping up and kicking him in the jaw with both feet. He fell unconscious in a heap. For a moment, only the hum of emergency lights and the rasp of heavy breathing filled the space. Kale glanced over at her. "You fight like a storm. Remind me never to piss you off." She grinned, panting. "You'd be amazed how often that's been said." They regrouped by the hatch. Kale looked out over the rail path, a sheer drop below, and only a narrow footledge on the outer shell. The train was still dead-stopped in the middle of nowhere, red dunes stretching under twin moons. "We get the passengers to the front," Sayla said, already thinking 3 steps ahead. "We seal the back half. Then we fight or escape. Whichever buys us more time." Kale nodded. "Let's make them regret ever stepping on this train." They moved like soldiers, like survivalists, like two beings who had never fought side by side but instinctively knew how. They made their way car by car, clearing raiders where they found them, some knocked unconscious, others driven back by the sheer ferocity of Kale's strikes and Sayla's precision. Word must have spread through the gang. The passengers weren't as helpless as they seemed, especially with a human brawler and a vulpine whirlwind leading them. When they reached the central car, Sayla climbed up to address the huddled civilians. "All of you, listen!" she called out, her voice ringing with authority. "The rear cars are compromised. Raiders are breaching from the roof and sides. We need to move you forward, now." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Fear. Hesitation. Kale stepped in. "She's not joking. Anyone who can walk, help someone who can't. We'll lead you through. If you stay, you die." That lit a fire. They started moving. Kale and Sayla took the flanks, guiding everyone forward 2 cars. When they reached the first-class cabin, relatively untouched and reinforced, they began forming a barricade using overturned chairs and blast panels. "This'll hold them for maybe 10 minutes," Kale said, shoving a control console against the door. 10 minutes might be all we need," Sayla replied, already connecting her datapad to the cabin's control interface. Her claws danced over the glowing screen. "What are you doing?" Kale asked. "Trying to reroute power from the maglev core to trigger an emergency lockdown. If I can isolate this car, we might be able to decouple the rest." Kale's eyes widened. "You can do that?" "If the interface isn't fried, yes. But I'll need someone to trigger the release manually from the undercarriage coupling." She looked at him. "And I'm the only one who knows how to rewire the navigation feed. Which means I'm the one who has to climb under a moving train," Kale said flatly. Sayla's ears perked. "You're not moving yet. Doesn't make me feel better." But he was already checking his gear. Before he left, Sayla stepped forward. Her tail flicked uncertainly. "You're putting yourself at risk for people you don't even know." "I'm putting myself at risk for you," he said quietly. That silenced her. Then, slowly, she reached up and placed a hand on his chest. Her touch was light, but electric. "Come back," she said. "I don't want to owe my life to a dead man." Kale smirked. "I'm stubborn, remember?" She didn't reply, just held his gaze a moment longer, then turned back to her datapad. As Kale ducked out of the cabin and descended toward the underside of the car, Sayla's thoughts spun like the rail gyros. This wasn't just survival anymore. Something had changed. And she wasn't ready to lose it. The undercarriage of the mag train howled with the wind as Kale clambered onto the narrow maintenance rail, clutching metal handholds slick with sand and heat. He moved fast, feeling the occasional jolt as the train shuddered, somehow still half alive, but not for long. He reached the primary coupling between the central and rear cars. A thick magnetic seal hummed with dormant energy, its power source flickering from sabotage. The release mechanism was mechanical, buried beneath rusted panels. He pried one open with his knife and found a knotted mess of wires and coolant tubes. Come on, he muttered, trying to remember what little he knew from Coalition military field manuals. Above, the screech of boots on the train's roof signaled that the raiders were regrouping. They didn't care about the passengers. They wanted Sayla, and whatever her abilities could unlock. Cale didn't hesitate. He bypassed the coded relays, spliced the ground wire to the surge channel, then flipped the manual override with a yank of a stripped cable. A deafening clang echoed through the undercarriage. The coupling disengaged. Instantly, the last 3 cars detached, slowing behind them and coasting into dead silence. Cale turned just in time to see a raider leap across the gap, only to miss by inches and plummet into the dunes below, swallowed in seconds by a crimson dust storm. "Release complete!" he shouted into his comm. Inside the front car, Sayla exhaled and initiated the lockdown. Steel shutters slammed down over every window. The mag brakes hissed as power rerouted. "You did it!" Her voice came over Cale's earpiece. "No sweat," Cale said, even though he was dripping with it. "Just another quiet stroll beneath the train." He started climbing back toward the access hatch when a glint of movement caught his eye. From the desert beyond the tracks, something massive stirred beneath the sands. He froze, gripping the rail tightly as the dunes rippled, then exploded upward. A monstrous shape emerged, serpentine, armored, easily the length of a cargo freighter. Its mouth opened in a roar that turned the very air into static. Sayla's voice hit his ear again, sharper this time. "Cale, get inside. Now." "What is that?" "Desert horror," she said, voice trembling. "They call it a burrow maw. It hunts by vibration." Cale's blood ran cold. "And we just gave it one hell of a dinner bell." The creature lunged toward the track. Cale didn't wait. He scrambled up the rest of the car's side, yanked the hatch open, and fell inside just as the train jolted violently from impact. The burrow maw had found them. They weren't just running from raiders anymore. They were being hunted. Cale slammed the hatch behind him just as the train tilted from the sheer force of the impact. Screams echoed through the cabin. Cargo tumbled. Somewhere up front, a panel burst in a spray of sparks. Sayla ran to him, eyes wide. Her fur bristled with alarm, her orange tail lashing side to side like a whip. "You okay?" she asked breathlessly. He nodded. "Barely. But we've got a new problem." "I saw it." She pointed to the hollow screen on the wall, where a flickering drone feed showed the burrow maw, a monstrous serpent of steel-plated hide and bioluminescent spines, churning through the sand beside them. "It's matching speed," she said, voice grim. "It's not just curious. It's tracking us." Cale stepped up beside her. "Then we lead it somewhere it doesn't want to go." Sayla blinked. "Where?" "The canyon's still 50 clicks away, and there's nothing but open desert in between. Unless you can find us a pit, a ravine, or an abandoned quarry, we're stuck playing tag." She didn't answer, just closed her eyes. Cale watched, heart pounding, as her posture shifted. She went still. Totally still. Ears twitching, muzzle slightly tilted upward. Like she was listening to something underground. "I can sense something," she murmured. "Below us. Deep. A collapsed aquifer tunnel, or maybe a cave system. It runs beneath the eastern ridge. If we divert the train that way—" Wait, Cale said, frowning. "Divert the train? Are you planning to derail us?" "Only partly," she said quickly. "Just enough to plunge into the cavity. If the cavern is deep enough, we might survive the fall." "Might. We don't have time for better odds." The train shook again. The burrow maw had struck the rail behind them. Cale ran to the front cabin and yanked the manual navigation lever. "How long until we reach the ridge?" 3 minutes, maybe less," Sayla replied, joining him. "But we'll need to reroute the mag guides. Otherwise we'll just bounce off the surface like a brick." Cale looked at her. "How fast can you hack?" "Fast enough." She slid into the co-pilot seat and hooked into the rail system's internal network with her datapad. Hollow interfaces bloomed before her. Kale watched the data scroll across her screen: schematics, power grids, guidance nodes. Her claws moved with machine precision. "You've done this before?" he asked. "Only once," she muttered. "It ended with a crater. But everyone lived." He gave a dry laugh. "Comforting." The desert ridge loomed ahead now, a wall of rust-stained rock and collapsed arches of forgotten mines. The perfect place for a trap. Or a tomb. "Mag guides redirected," Sayla said, her voice tense. "You better brace." Kale reached for the stabilizer controls. "Tell me this works." Sayla's eyes glowed faintly in the emergency light. "It will. Or we'll be buried so deep the raiders'll never find us." The burrow maw was just meters behind them now, mouth wide, lined with rows of jagged, stone-breaking teeth. The ridge was coming fast. "Hang on!" Kale shouted. The train veered. And everything became fire, wind, and roaring darkness. The train screamed as it left the tracks, metal shrieking against stone. Gravity vanished for a breathless second, then the entire world slammed downward. Kale hit the cabin ceiling and then the floor in rapid succession. Sparks flew. Panels burst. A window shattered, letting in a jet of sand and screaming wind. The train tumbled nose first into the chasm, the front car splitting free from the rest as it plunged into darkness. And then, silence. Just the faint hiss of settling dust, and the distant echoes of falling debris. Kale groaned and pushed himself up from where he'd been thrown. His shoulder throbbed. His knuckles were bloody. But he was alive. "Sayla?" he rasped. A movement to his left. Then her voice, shaky, but alive. "Here." She was curled near the cracked bulkhead, fur-matted with dust, but otherwise unharmed. Her tail flicked weakly as she sat up, wincing. "You okay?" Kale asked, crawling toward her. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think the impact was cushioned by the tunnel collapse. We hit a pocket, not solid ground." Kale looked around, slowly taking in their surroundings. The front train car had landed nose down at a steep angle inside a massive underground cavern. The glow of Sayla's bioluminescent fur cast faint reflections on the dark stone. The place looked ancient, unnaturally smooth walls, mineral veins glowing faintly, and distant echoes of dripping water. "Where are we?" he muttered. Sayla tilted her head SN. She shook her head. "Not yet. It might have lost us in the collapse." Then, as if summoned by the very words, the earth trembled beneath their feet. Kale grabbed the support rail. "That thing really doesn't know when to quit." "We need to move," Sayla said, already climbing toward a breach in the side panel. "There's a current of fresh air from this tunnel. It might lead up." They emerged from the ruined train and into the cavern proper. It was enormous, far more vast than either expected. Pillars of naturally fused rock rose into darkness above. Crystalline structures jutted from the walls like glowing thorns. Pools of water shimmered across the floor, reflecting Sayla's golden glow. Then they saw it. A city. Half buried. Half carved from the stone itself. Spires and domes of obsidian architecture built directly into the cavern walls, all centered around a pool of glowing blue water. It pulsed with energy. Sayla gasped. "This isn't natural." "No," Kale agreed. "It's ancient." She stepped closer to the edge of the ruined promenade. "My people have myths about underground sanctuaries. Refuge cities built in the time before memory. I thought they were just stories. Looks like the story was true." Far in the distance, a low rumble echoed again. The burrow maw had found a way down, and it was coming. "Whatever this place is," Kale said, his voice steady, "we better hope it has a back door." Sayla led them down a sloping corridor of stone stairs carved so seamlessly they might have been melted into shape. The deeper they went, the brighter the walls glowed with veins of bioluminescent ore. Strange runes marked the archways, ancient, flowing symbols that shimmered faintly as she passed. They reached the outer edge of the underground city. Massive stone gates, half collapsed but still intact, stood like guardians, weathered by time. Selah placed her hand on one of the gate panels. The runes lit up beneath her touch. A vibration trembled through the stone. "You're activating it," Kale said, staring at her hand. "My biochemistry," she whispered. "It's responding to me. Like it remembers." The gates groaned, then parted with slow, grinding weight. Beyond them lay a sprawling plaza paved in geometric spirals, buildings shaped like wind-carved monuments, and a towering central obelisk surrounded by shallow pools glowing blue beneath a glassy surface. Kale stared in awe. This was a whole civilization. A quarry heritage, Selah said quietly. Long before we were called Vulpine. My people must have lived here thousands of cycles ago. She walked toward the obelisk, drawn to it. Its base was a console, ancient, but still alive with dormant power. She knelt, brushed away the dust, and ran her fingers across the etched surface. The obelisk flared to life. Dozens of glyphs illuminated at once. Holographic images spun to life, showing maps of Varela, veins of water buried deep beneath the desert, and towering structures that once channeled life to the surface. "This isn't just a city," she said in a hushed voice. "It's a terraformer." Kale's eyes widened. "A planetary-scale one?" She nodded. "It drew water from deep aquifers and pumped it to the surface through spires and tunnels. It could bring rain back to Varela." He stepped closer, gazing up at the swirling map of the planet. "So the reason you sense those aquifers, the reason your scent triggers reactions in other species, it's all tied to this place." "Not just scent," she said, turning to face him. "We were the key. My people were living conduits. We didn't just work the terraformer, we were part of it." Before they could speak further, a deep, grinding roar echoed through the cavern. They both froze. Then came the tremor. Louder. Closer. The burrow maw. Kale backed toward the obelisk, instinctively shielding Selah. "Whatever you're doing, speed it up." She turned back to the console, her claws moving faster now, symbols responding to her touch like old friends waking from hibernation. "Give me just a few more minutes," she said, her voice tight with focus. "I can activate the system, maybe even call for help." Outside, rock began to fall from the cavern ceiling. Kale turned toward the tunnel entrance. "I'll hold it off." Selah grabbed his arm. "You won't survive a direct fight with it." "Maybe not," he said, pulling free. "But I only need to distract it." And then he was gone, vanishing into the dim glow of the ancient city as the monster approached. Kale sprinted across the shattered plaza, bootsteps echoing against stone that hadn't felt life in millennia. The obelisk's glow dimmed behind him, and the roar of the burrow maw grew louder with every step. He rounded a crumbling tower just as the earth exploded. The beast erupted from beneath the city floor, a geyser of debris and fury. Its head alone was the size of a hover truck, plated in overlapping scales like shattered obsidian. Bioluminescent eyes scanned in every direction, then locked onto him. Kale froze for only a second. "Hey, ugly!" he shouted, waving both arms. "Over here!" The burrow maw surged toward him. Kale dove aside as its massive jaws snapped shut where he'd just been. Dust and chunks of stone rained around him. He rolled, scrambled to his feet, and ran toward the outer ridge of the plaza, leading it away from the obelisk. Behind him, Selah's voice echoed in his calm. "Kale, I've activated the terraformer. The system is booting, but it needs energy. I don't have enough charge to complete the sequence." "What kind of energy?" he panted, weaving between fallen columns. "Bioelectric," she replied. "Organic current, heat, pulse, breath. It needs something alive to finish the cycle." Kale gritted his teeth. "Figures. The ancient world runs on blood." The burrow maw slammed into the path behind him again, sending Kale flying into a wall. Pain flared in his ribs, but he forced himself up, coughing. "I'll buy you a few more minutes," he rasped into the mic. "No!" Selah's voice cracked through. Come back! If you die out there, you'll bring the planet back to life, Kale interrupted. I've made worse trades. But before he could turn and run again, a blur of orange and silver shot across the plaza. Selah. She leapt from the upper terrace and landed in a crouch beside him, tail flaring for balance. Her eyes blazed with intensity. Stupid, stubborn human, she hissed. You're not dying without me. He blinked, dazed. I told you to finish the activation. I am the activation, she said, grabbing his hand. Then she pulled him into a run, straight toward the central pool at the base of the obelisk. The Burromaw roared behind them, furious, gaining. Jump! Selah cried. Together, they leapt into the glowing waters. The pool wasn't water at all, it was something else. Denser. Warmer. Alive. The moment their bodies broke the surface, the obelisk lit up like a star. Power surged. Symbols flared to life across the city. The ground trembled, not with destruction, but with awakening. The terraformer was online. The Burromaw screeched, flailing as columns of energy rose from the plaza and wrapped around it like vines. It thrashed, roared, but could not move. Then, with a final, keening shriek, it was dragged into the earth by tendrils of living stone. Gone. Silence fell. Kale surfaced, gasping, only to find Selah floating beside him, glowing brighter than ever, her freckles pulsing like a heartbeat. You okay? He asked, reaching for her. She nodded, leaning into him. We did it. The system, it's responding. Around them, the ancient city came to life. Water flowed. Lights blazed. And above them, through a fissure in the ceiling, moonlight streamed down onto the reborn heart of Varela. Kale pulled Selah close, his voice raw. I thought I lost you. Her claws gently touched his chest. You never will. Not now. And in that moment, in the arms of a glowing vulpine girl beneath a sky he never thought he'd see again, Kale knew one thing. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The ancient city pulsed with new life. From the heart of the terraformer, rivers of luminous water snaked through stone channels, branching outward like veins in a sleeping titan. As Selah and Kale climbed from the central pool, the floor beneath them thrummed with a low, rhythmic hum, like the planet itself was breathing again. Above them, the fissure widened with a slow rumble. Shafts of moonlight pierced the cavern, mingling with the blue glow of the awakened system. Warm air flowed inward, pushing out centuries of stillness. Dust danced in the light like starlight trapped in a storm. Kale sat down on a chunk of broken marble, soaked, bruised, and still alive. So, is it safe to call this a win? Selah sat beside him, orange fur glistening with droplets of living water. Her tail curled instinctively around his boot. That depends. You still breathing? Barely. Then yeah, she said with a sly smile. We'll count it. They watched together as more lights came to life in the distant walls of the cavern. Structures long buried by sand and silence flared with purpose. Some of the pools overflowed, cascading down steps and terraces to disappear into the city's foundation. Do you think it will hold? Kale asked. Yes, Selah whispered, her eyes fixed on the obelisk. This wasn't just a machine. It was a promise. To your people? To every people, she said. Water for all. A living world, not a hoarded one. He studied her in the glow. No wonder they wanted to capture you. She turned to him, ears twitching. You never asked why I was on the rail line in the first place. I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would. She looked away, a flicker of hesitation in her golden eyes. I was running. From who? From the Varela Mining Authority. They wanted me to locate aquifers for them, but not to help people. They wanted control. Water rights. Territory. Leverage. And you said no? Selah nodded. So they sent bounty hunters. Raiders. Mercs. You saw how far they were willing to go. Kale's jaw tightened. You think that was coincidence? The ambush on the train? No. Her voice hardened. It was a trap. For me. And you got caught in it? Glad I did, he said without hesitation. She blinked. Why? Because I never would have found this, he said, gesturing to the reborn city. Or you. A long pause followed. The air between them felt heavy with meaning. Selah reached over, her hand brushing his. You always talk like you're ready to die. I just stopped expecting to live for anything. She leaned in, muzzle close to his ear. Then let me give you something worth surviving for. Before he could speak, her lips touched his jaw in a delicate, slow kiss, cool and tingling with that same electric energy he felt in the pool. His breath caught. Their fingers laced instinctively. Somewhere above them, the first droplets of real rain in centuries began to fall through the open fissure. And Virella stirred to life. Hours passed. They made camp near the central obelisk, gathering what supplies they could salvage from the wrecked train. The survivors, still shaken, had filtered into the outer layers of the underground city, guided by the soft light of the newly awakened terraformer. With each passing hour, the air grew warmer, moister. Rainwater seeped from the stone like tears long withheld. Kale tended to the wounded. Selah coordinated energy flow from the obelisk. It was quiet, almost peaceful. Until the gunfire started. A blast echoed down the stone corridors, sharp and close. Kale spun toward the sound. That wasn't a cave echo. No, Selah said, standing tall. Her ears perked, tail straight. That was a plasma rifle. Military grade. Before either of them could move, a dozen armed figures marched from the upper terraces. Coalition mercenaries in sleek black armor, rifles raised, helmets gleaming. At their head, a familiar figure descended slowly, his face framed by silver implants and a smirk honed by years of command. Draven, Selah whispered, voice cold. Kale tensed. You know him? She nodded grimly. Captain Arden Draven. Virella's lead Hydra operations enforcer. Exiled from the Central Systems. Last I heard, he was working as a private contractor for the highest bidder. Draven's voice echoed through the cavern. Well. The lost fox and her human pet. Found yourselves a cozy little ruin, haven't you? Selah stepped forward, claws flexing. You followed us. No, I waited for you to open the door, he said, tapping a control module on his wrist. We've been trying to activate this site for decades. But the system needed a key. Turns out that key purrs, glows, and smells like a coral reef. Kale growled. You're not taking her. Draven laughed. Oh, I'm not interested in her. He raised his hand toward the obelisk. I'm interested in what she unlocked. The mercs moved to surround the ancient structure. Two of them dropped drones that began scanning the console's interface. Selah lunged forward, but Draven fired a warning shot that scorched the stone inches from her feet. Don't be stupid, he said. You already did your part. We'll take it from here. You can't control it. She warned. It responds to instinct, to resonance. To DNA. He cut in. Which is why I brought this. From behind the group, another figure emerged. A female vulpine, taller than Selah, dressed in synthetic armor that shimmered like plastic scales. Her fur was darker, more red than orange, and her expression held no warmth. Meat Vexera, Draven said smugly. Half a quarry. Bred for terra symbiosis. Selah's jaw clenched. She's a clone. She's the future, Draven said. And she doesn't talk back. Kale stepped beside Selah, hand on his weapon. We're not going to let you hijack what she risked her life to awaken. Draven tilted his head. And how exactly are you going to stop me? With what? A pipe wrench and a stubborn jawline? Something like that, Kale said. Then the floor beneath the mercenaries shimmered. Selah's eyes flashed. The system's still connected to me. And it knows who the intruders are. From the surrounding walls, pulses of light shot toward the ground. The liquid channels flared bright, and a sudden, thunderous crack split the plaza as a pillar of water surged upward, knocking two mercenaries clean into the air. Chaos erupted. Draven shouted orders. Vexera lunged. And Kale and Sayla braced to fight, not just for the planet, but for each other. Blasts filled the ancient plaza as the terraformer awakened its final defenses. Jets of water shot from embedded vents, forming liquid limbs that moved with impossible precision, disarming one merc, smashing another into a pillar of crystal-veined stone. Kale ducked behind an outcropping as plasma bolts sizzled past. "Remind me again, this thing isn't sentient, right?" Sayla crouched beside him, her fur drenched, her eyes blazing. "Not sentient. But it remembers. It knows friend from foe." A sharp crack behind them. Vexera landed in a crouch, claws dragging long gouges through the stone as she skidded to a stop. "You're not the only one with resonance," she hissed at Sayla. Sayla turned slowly, tail flicking. "But you're synthetic. You may mimic our blood, but you'll never feel the connection." Vexera lunged. The two Vulpine women collided in a blur of orange and red, claws sparking, teeth bared. They slammed into the obelisk's base, triggering a ripple of light. The tower groaned under the sudden surge. Kale leapt into the open, tackling a merc just as he lined up a shot on Sayla. He grabbed the man's pulse rifle and smashed it across his helmet, dropping him with a grunt. "Draven!" he shouted, turning toward the captain, who now hovered near the back of the plaza with a personal energy shield humming around him. "You want power so badly, why don't you come claim it yourself?" Draven sneered. "You're not even worth the ammo." Sayla and Vexera tumbled across the wet stone. Vexera was stronger, more muscle, enhanced reflexes, but Sayla was faster. She ducked a swipe and kicked her twin into a glowing water channel, triggering a violent arc of blue electricity. Vexera screamed and convulsed, momentarily stunned. Kale ran to Sayla's side, rifle in hand. "You good?" She nodded, breathing hard. "She's not done. That vat-grown mongrel's got backup systems." As if on cue, Vexera rose again, steam curling from her soaked armor. Her eyes glowed an unnatural violet. "She's linked directly to the obelisk," Sayla murmured. "She's trying to override me." Kale looked around. "Can you stop her?" "Yes. But only if I reconnect to the primary node." She pointed toward the central pool. Kale followed her gaze, right through a wave of advancing mercenaries. He cursed. "Of course it's not easy." He turned to her, face hard. "Go. I'll clear the way." Before she could argue, he was already moving, rifle blazing. Plasma bolts cut through the mist, knocking back one merc after another. He charged like a man with nothing left to lose, because what he had left was behind him. Sayla took her chance, sprinting across the soaked stone. Vexera roared behind her, chasing. Energy pulses lit the ruins as the terraformer reacted to their duel, walls shimmering, channels boiling with light. At the edge of the pool, Sayla dove. The moment her fur touched the water, the obelisk shuddered. Vexera leapt in after her, but the system rejected her. A column of liquid light blasted her backward, flinging her into a collapsed spire. Then everything stilled. From the obelisk, a single pulse rang out, a low, harmonic wave that shook the city like a bell being rung for the first time in ages. The light dimmed. And Sayla rose from the pool, glowing brighter than the tower itself. She wasn't just linked now. She was the system. Kale stared, breath caught in his throat. Sayla stood waist deep in the pool, her orange fur radiating with light, as if the obelisk had poured itself into her. The glowing lines of ancient script crawled along her arms and neck, threading down to her fingertips. Her eyes, normally gold, now shimmered with the same bioluminescent blue as the terraformer's core. The storm had passed. But the silence that followed was sharper than any scream. Draven took a step forward from the shadows of the crumbled wall. "Impressive," he said, slow and deliberate. "I didn't think you had the nerve." Kale leveled the stolen rifle at him. "Don't." But Draven's smirk widened. "What are you going to do? Shoot the only man who knows how to disarm her if she loses control?" Kale didn't blink. "Try me." Behind them, Vexera stirred again. The blast had cracked one of her cheek implants, revealing the synthetic mesh beneath. Her tail hung limp, twitching spasmodically. Yet even crippled, she crawled toward the pool. Sayla turned to her slowly. "You don't belong here," she said, not in anger but in sorrow. "I am you." Bexara spat, coughing up fluid. "Improved?" "No," Sayla said gently, stepping out of the pool. "You're a shadow. You were built to control, but this place doesn't answer to control. It answers to harmony." With a flick of her wrist, the water channeled itself upward in a whip of light and struck Vexera clean across the chest. The clone collapsed in silence, this time not moving. Draven roared in fury and fired. Sayla moved faster than Kale had ever seen. She raised one hand, and the plasma bolt stopped midair, frozen in a sphere of liquid light. With a twist of her fingers, it reversed direction and struck Draven square in the chest. His shield flickered and shattered. He hit the stone floor with a crack of bone and metal, his weapon clattering away. Kale lowered his rifle. "Well? Remind me never to get on your bad side." Sayla walked toward him slowly, the glow beginning to dim. Her claws trembled slightly, an aftershock of raw energy. "You okay?" he asked. She gave a soft nod. "The system stabilized. It's awake now, fully. The pulse will reach other outposts. The aquifers will rise. And the mercs?" She glanced at the scattering survivors. Those still breathing had dropped their weapons. "They know who this world belongs to now." Kale approached her, gently taking her hand. Her glow softened to a warm hue, like a hearth just stoked. "I saw you in that light," he said quietly. "And for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was looking at you or a goddess." Sayla leaned in, her forehead touching his. "You're the only one who's ever seen me for what I am. Not just what I can do." His arms wrapped around her. The obelisk pulsed once, like a heartbeat in the distance. Rain began to fall again through the cavern ceiling, this time not a warning, but a promise. A baptism of something new. Above them, across the desolate crust of Varela, water began to rise. And below, two souls, one born of fire, the other forged in war, found something worth rebuilding. Together. It took 3 days for the coalition to arrive. Not in warships, not in dropships loaded with soldiers, but in research vessels and terraforming teams, summoned by the ancient city's reactivation pulse. Across Varela, the signal had awakened other forgotten facilities. Blueprints long-thought myth began appearing in central records. And in every report, one name was repeated, Sayla Varn. The Vulpine girl who'd awakened a sleeping planet. Now she stood atop the terrace of the ancient city, wrapped in a long cloak to shield her from the steadily falling rain. Her fur glistened under the glow of lanterns, and her eyes watched the horizon where distant dunes were now streaked with rivulets of water carving their way to waiting basins. "It's happening," she whispered as Kale joined her. "Varela's changing." He came up beside her, arms crossed over his chest. His bruises had faded, but a new kind of weight settled in his eyes, purpose, rather than pain. "You changed it," he said. "You didn't just save the planet. You rewrote its future." She gave a small, tired smile. "I didn't do it alone." Kale chuckled. "No, but I think you were the one glowing like a comet while I was getting tossed around by giant sand serpents." Her tail flicked around his leg. "Don't discount the man who faced a burrow maul with a glorified wrench." They stood in silence for a moment, watching a group of children from the mining outposts play in one of the newly formed surface ponds. Laughter echoed, light and high-pitched, so unfamiliar in this harsh world it sounded foreign. Beautifully so. "Is it true what they're saying?" Kale asked after a while. "That you're being offered command of the Planetary Council?" Sayla hesitated. "Yes. They want me to lead the Restoration Directorate." He nodded slowly. "Will you do it?" "I don't know," she admitted. "My people never wanted power. Just freedom. But maybe if I stand at the front, I can make sure no one ever uses this world's gifts to control or divide again." Kale turned to her. Then do it. But only if it's what you want. Her hand found his, fingers curling gently. Only if you stay with me. You'd have to shoot me to get rid of me, he said, leaning down to press a kiss to her temple. And even then I'd crawl back. She leaned into him, tail swaying. I believe you. Below them, a convoy of supply vehicles entered the valley, bringing clean water and food to the outer settlements, delivered not for profit, but for renewal. Above, a blue-green shimmer danced in the sky. The first signs of atmospheric stabilization were forming, a promise of future rain. Selah, Kale murmured. She looked up at him, ears twitching. Yes? When this world is reborn, he said, brushing a strand of damp fur behind her ear. Let's build a new one, too. You and me. She smiled, eyes glowing softly. One world at a time, Kale Draven. Their lips met again, not in desperation, but in deep, unwavering trust. Not the kiss of fugitives or survivors. The kiss of builders. And far beneath their feet, the living heart of Varela pulsed with approval. Weeks passed. The ancient city, now officially dubbed Varellan Core by the Coalition, became the beating heart of the planet's revival. Terraforming stations synced to its pulses. Rivers flowed where there had only been cracked earth. Crops took root. Clouds thickened overhead and began falling in regular, gentle storms. But for Kale and Selah, the most profound change wasn't the landscape. It was the quiet. After years of war, noise, metal, and motion, there were mornings now filled only with the soft patter of rain and the flick of her tail against the bedding. Their shared quarters were built into a high spire overlooking the glowing pools. The room was simple, smooth stone walls, a single desk with Selah's schematics and ancient scrolls, and an open balcony where they'd sit together and watch the valley breathe. Kale stirred one morning to find Selah perched on the railing in a long shawl, sipping something warm from a curved ceramic mug. He sat up slowly. You're going to fall off that one day. Her ear twitched. Says the man who jumped between railcars. Touché, he muttered, rising and stretching. How long have you been up? An hour. Couldn't sleep. The terraformer's signals shifted slightly at dawn. She glanced over her shoulder. I think another node just woke up in the southern reaches. Kale came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You know they don't need you to micromanage the planet, right? Tell the planet that, she said, tail coiling around his leg. It likes me. He chuckled, resting his chin on her shoulder. I can't blame it. They stood there a long moment, watching blue tendrils of mist curl through the ancient valley below. Then her voice, softer now. Do you ever think about leaving? He blinked. Leaving Varela? Not forever. Just seeing the stars again. Visiting your old home. Showing me where you learned to shoot things with industrial tools. He grinned. Elverin Delta's mostly mud and humid forests. But yeah, maybe. Someday. Her hand touched his. Would you take me? In a heartbeat. She smiled, brushing her muzzle against his jaw. Then let's fix this place first. And when it's truly healed, we'll go find the rest of the galaxy. Deal. A soft chime rang through the stone walls. The calm terminal activated with a familiar voice. Lieutenant Vesna, the new Coalition liaison. Dr. Varn, Mr. Draven. We've received readings from the Zephyrin Plateau outpost. They're reporting surface water and ancient tech signatures. It's another site. Selah turned toward the console. Her expression brightened. Finally. Kale grabbed his jacket and slung it over one shoulder. You think this one will be as dramatic as the last? She raised a brow. I'm bringing my claws. Just in case. They left together, side by side. Not as fugitives. Not as survivors. But as guardians of a world being reborn, one oasis, one storm, one ancient secret at a time. The journey to the Zephyrin Plateau was rougher than expected. The highlands were wilder. Less touched by the main terraformer's influence. Jagged cliffs jutted through the fog, and the path their shuttle took was narrow, hugging the rim of a red canyon where sand still fell like snow. Kale piloted manually, one hand on the control yoke, the other resting on his pulse sidearm. Sayla stood at the viewport, her eyes scanning the fractured earth below. "This land is resisting," she murmured. He glanced up. "You mean the geology?" She shook her head. "The memory. Some of these places, they still carry the pain of what happened before." Kale didn't press her. Over the past weeks, he'd seen it more and more, the way she could sense things beneath the surface, things he couldn't begin to understand. The obelisk hadn't just awakened technology in her, it had awakened history. And sometimes that history hurt. When they landed, a thin mist hugged the plateau. The Coalition's survey team had set up camp near the ruins, but they were keeping their distance. Word had spread. About Sayla, about the city, about what happened when someone tried to control what wasn't theirs. A research officer approached. "Dr. Varn, Mr. Draven. The site's just ahead. No hostiles." But, Sayla asked. The woman hesitated. "There's movement inside. Light, sound. We sent drones in, but they malfunctioned." Kale exchanged a glance with Sayla. "So we're walking blind." She nodded. "Good. The ancient systems don't respond well to machines. Only us." They left the camp behind and entered the ruin. It was different than Varellan Core. Colder. Older. The structures were twisted, as if the rock itself had warped over time. Glyphs glowed faintly along the walls, but in erratic pulses, like a damaged heartbeat. As they reached the inner sanctum, Sayla froze. "What is it?" Kale asked quietly. She lifted a trembling hand toward the central dais. A shattered obelisk lay in ruins, its top half cracked, blackened, burned. Around it, stone seats in a half-circle formation, like a council chamber. And on every wall, murals. Murals of war. She stepped forward, brushing her fingers across the stone. "This was a judgment hall." Kale frowned. "For trials?" "No. For endings." She turned toward him, her face pale beneath her orange fur. "This is where my ancestors made the decision to shut it all down. To bury the terraformer network. To abandon the surface." Kale stared at the broken obelisk. "Why?" She pointed to one of the final murals. It showed a world consumed by fire. Ships in orbit. Bombardment. A desperate exodus underground. "They were invaded," she whispered. "They tried to defend the planet using the terraformer network. But they couldn't control it. The system turned wild. Unpredictable. So they destroyed the uplink. And hid." Kale exhaled slowly. "And now we've turned it all back on." She looked up at him. "We need to be careful. The system listens. It adapts. If we push it too far, it could undo everything we've built." He reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Then we won't push. We'll guide. Like you always have." Sayla nodded, but her eyes lingered on the mural of fire. And somewhere, deep in the stone beneath their feet, something ancient stirred, watching, listening, waiting. The past was not finished with them yet. That night, the wind on Zephyrin Plateau howled through the ruined pillars like voices murmuring secrets. The Coalition camp had powered down most of its lights to conserve energy, and the research staff stayed in their tents, uneasy after Sayla's revelations. But she couldn't sleep. Wrapped in her cloak, Sayla sat alone on a broken plinth near the edge of the plateau. Below her, the jagged cliffs rolled endlessly into the mist, the ancient aquifers pulsing faintly beneath the stone like veins under skin. Kale approached quietly and sat beside her. "You've been staring into the dark for hours." "It talks back," she said softly. He studied her. "What do you mean?" Sayla looked at him, her eyes reflecting the stars. "The system, the network, it's not just memory. It's presence. The terraformer matrix was built with something more than stone and light. They called it Sen, a living current. A resonance that could think. Adapt. Like artificial intelligence? More like spiritual intelligence," she said. The ancients believed the planet itself chose to speak through it. And when they activated the first node, she paused. It changed them. Kale was quiet for a while. Then he asked, "Is it changing you?" Sayla didn't answer immediately. Her tail twitched behind her, restless. "I feel it in my skin. My dreams. It's like being tuned into a frequency I can't shut off. When I sleep, I see places I've never been. Faces I've never known. Decisions I've never made." He touched her hand gently. "You're still you, Sayla." She turned to him slowly. "What if I'm not? What if I'm becoming something else? What if that's why they buried the system, because they couldn't survive what it made them into?" Kale leaned closer. "If it comes down to it, I'll remind you who you are. I'll fight for you, even if it's against the system itself." She smiled faintly, her hand tightening around his. "You really mean that?" "Of course I do." Then, without warning, the ground beneath them trembled, just a flicker. Then another. And suddenly, a deep rumble echoed from within the ruins. A pillar near the center of the site cracked. A cascade of dust poured down as part of the dais shifted, revealing a stairwell that hadn't been there before. Sayla rose to her feet, fur bristling. "It's opening." Kale stood beside her. "Why now?" She didn't look away from the dark stairwell. "Because it hurt us." She began walking toward it, and Kale followed without hesitation. As they descended into the newly revealed passage, the stone walls around them began to glow. Not blue like the obelisks before, but deep crimson. The glyphs here pulsed not with life, but with warning. This wasn't a temple. It was a vault. And what lay within had been sealed for a reason. The deeper they descended, the thicker the air became, damp, heavy, filled with a metallic tang that clung to Kale's tongue. The red glyphs on the walls pulsed like heartbeats, each one seeming to quicken the further they went. Sayla moved ahead, her fingers brushing the carved stone with reverence and hesitation. "These symbols aren't a quarry standard," she murmured. "They're older. Proto-script. Barely anyone knows how to read this anymore." "You do," Kale said, watching the way her eyes flicked between the glowing lines. "You're starting to understand it without even thinking." She didn't reply, but her silence spoke volumes. Finally, the stairway ended at a circular chamber, vast and hollow, with a single structure at the center, a black sphere floating above a triangular altar. Runes circled its surface like orbiting moons. It hummed, not with energy, but with memory. Sayla froze. "This is it." Kale approached slowly, scanning the surroundings. "What is it?" She stepped to the edge of the altar and placed her palm against the base. The air shifted instantly. A low thrumming filled the space, like a massive engine starting up far beneath the ground. "The heart of Sen," she said quietly. "The first interface. This is where the entire terraforming system began." The sphere pulsed in response, casting shifting red light across the stone. It projected something into the air, a faint recording in hazy, ghost-like silhouettes. Kale watched as images danced in the mist. Vulpine figures, councils, storms. And then... war. Flames. Ships falling from the sky. Whole cities swallowed by their own rivers. Kale stepped closer, frowning. They turned the planet against itself. Sayla's voice was almost a whisper. Not intentionally. They were losing. The invaders had already breached the outer settlements. In desperation, they linked too many nodes at once. Overloaded the system. Which fought back. She nodded. Sen wasn't designed to be controlled by fear. It responded with purge protocols, not just against the invaders, but everything. The projection shifted again, showing the moment the Aquari elders sealed the vault, locking away the heart and its command functions. A sacrifice. A warning. Kale took a step back. And now we've unsealed it. The room went still. Then the sphere began to vibrate. The red glyphs dimmed to orange, then white. And the mist swirling around it condensed into a new image, Sayla. A perfect, glowing double of her. Same eyes. Same voice, when it spoke. Terraformer core sync achieved. Primary conduit detected. Kale raised his weapon instinctively. That's not you, right? Sayla didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the projection. Her fur stood on end, and her tail dropped low in alarm. Emergency directive, planetary defense grid is offline. Reactivation requires dual neurobinding. Sayla turned to Kale, face pale beneath her fur. It's asking for us. Both of us. Kale stepped forward. To do what? To wake the final protocol, she said, voice shaking. The part of the system no one was ever supposed to see. And above them, through layers of stone and memory, Varela held its breath. The chamber responded to their presence. The floating sphere drifted downward, settling just inches above the triangular altar. Threads of golden light unfurled from its surface, 3 lines extending in opposite directions, one for each point of the triangle. 2 of them pulsed brightly. Step there, Sayla whispered, pointing to one of the glowing spots across from her. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but awe. The system is reading our connection. Kale hesitated for only a second, then stepped forward, boots echoing on the stone. As he reached his position, the sphere flared between them, casting shifting bands of color across the chamber walls. Lines of code scrolled through the air in Aquari glyphs and ancient coalition script, so dense and fast it made Kale dizzy. He looked across at Sayla. Her arms were raised, eyes closed, glowing lines now etched along her collarbones and arms like living tattoos. What's happening? He asked. She opened her eyes. They gleamed with internal light. The system's preparing to bond. To what? To us. Before Kale could speak, the third point of the triangle shimmered, and someone else stepped into it. A figure flickered into existence. Taller than Sayla. Clad in ceremonial armor that glinted with obsidian plating and deep blue sigils. Her fur was white-orange, flecked with silver, aged. Weathered. Her presence radiated authority and sorrow. Sayla inhaled sharply. That's High Matron Silra. She was the last prime conduit. She vanished during the collapse. The projection bowed its head, then spoke in a language Kale couldn't understand, but somehow felt. Emotion and meaning wrapped into syllables not meant for human throats. Then it translated. You have awakened what was buried in grief. What we sealed in fear. This world remembers your kindness. But it also remembers fire. Sayla stepped closer to the sphere. We only want to restore what was lost. And in doing so, Silra replied, you have stirred what was sleeping beneath everything. The terraformers are not machines. They are seeds of the old galaxy, left behind by those who came before even us. Kale's heart pounded. You mean they didn't build it? No, the matron said. We only inherited it. And now so do you. The room darkened. From the floor, pillars of light erupted, revealing maps of other worlds. Not just Varela. Not just this system. But dozens, hundreds, all showing dormant terraformer signatures, each tied to the same deep-rooted network. Each one waiting for a key. Or a pair of keys. The system had never required one conduit. It had always needed two. A bond. Unity. Balance. Sayla's voice shook. It chose us. Kale reached across the light to take her hand. Then we accept. The matron's image smiled gently, and dissolved into stardust. The sphere flared. The chamber exploded with light, blinding and warm. Then, silence. The triangle vanished. The vault began to close. The glyphs cooled to a dim golden hum. And the voice of the system echoed softly between their minds. Balance restored. Awakening complete. They stood in the quiet, still clutching each other's hands. Is it over? Kale asked. Sayla shook her head. No, she said, her eyes full of wonder and weight. It's only just begun. Because now they weren't just caretakers of Varela. They were the living keys to a galaxy of sleeping giants. Weeks turned into months. The Zephyrin Plateau became the second active terraformer site on Varela, its golden light visible even from orbit. With it online, rivers began to thread through once barren mountain valleys. Rain fell regularly. Entire villages rebuilt around the rising lakes, their people calling this era the Second Bloom. Kale and Selah became more than legends. They became leaders, not by title, but by presence. Together, they visited each awakened site. Together, they stood before newly exposed cores. And when they touched the systems, his hands calloused, hers glowing with the pulse of the planet, the world itself seemed to settle. But their bond wasn't just functional. It was something deeper. Late at night, in their quarters above Varel Core, Kale would find Selah staring out the balcony again. Not with fear now, but with hope. "The signals are spreading," she whispered one evening, tail curling around his waist as he wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Other planets are responding. Systems that haven't lit up in centuries." He kissed the side of her muzzle. "So what do we do? Start visiting them one by one?" "We could. But—" She turned to him, pressing her forehead to his. "But I think we build first. Here. A place worth coming home to." Kale smiled. "Home. I like the sound of that." Below them, children splashed in the shallow pools of the terraformers' runoff channels. Fields of green crept across the cracked earth. The air smelled of rain and something sweeter, new blossoms, born of old soil. And above, satellites recorded what the galaxy would soon confirm: the ancient terraforming network, forgotten for millennia, was alive again. Because two unlikely souls had found each other. A stubborn human who saw through scars. And a luminous vulpine who smelled like oceans and starlight. Their touch had brought back rivers. Their bond had reawakened empires of stone and light. And together they had done the one thing no system could do alone. They had learned to trust.